Hey guys, my name is Brandon, aka the BrandoCritic. Thank you guys so much for being here today. I really do appreciate it. I was able to see Samaritan a little bit early, and I'm here to give you my honest, no BS, non-spoiler review and tell you if it's worth a watch today. And again, guys, this is only my personal opinion, but let me know your thoughts of Samaritan down in the comment section down below. So, we have Samaritan coming straight to Amazon Prime from Julius Avery, and you know him from such films as Jerry Can, Overlord, and Son of a Gun. That's the last movie. And it stars Sylvester Stallone, Javon Walton, Pilou Asbæk, and Dascha Polanco. And the story's about a kid living in a really bad neighborhood, but he's a really big fan of a superhero called Samaritan. However, Samaritan and his brother Nemesis had this giant fight about 20 years ago, and they were both considered dead, but this kid finds out where Samaritan actually lives 20 years later. So is this movie worth a watch? Well, I mean, it's a hard answer because I think that there are definitely going to be some people who definitely like this movie, and I can completely see why. But for me, I'm going to say that it's kind of a take it or leave it kind of a movie. Now, I will say though that this movie is going straight to streaming, but it does not feel like a streaming movie. It does feel like a movie that was supposed to come out in theaters. But the whole Amazon MGM thing happened. They put it straight to Amazon Prime, so you're not getting a Man from Toronto with this situation. You're not getting a Day Shift with the situation either. I would say that this movie is better than those. I feel like this movie has a bit more brains than those movies. And it's not a bad movie by any means, but I don't think that this movie has all the right tools to really warrant a recommendation from me. But let's go into the good moments, because there are some good elements in this movie. Number one, Javon Walton was fantastic. He was the showstopper in this movie. Now, obviously that this is a Sylvester Stallone production, so they're really going to be pushing him, but, you know, he's definitely past his prime. He's done 5 Rambo movies, and he's been in how many Rocky movies? I guess there'd be 8 now, I guess, with Creed 1 and 2. Sylvester Stallone is not Sylvester Stallone anymore, but Javon Walton, he's not like the big action hero, but he definitely does steal the show because of his performance. And again, with kid actors, it's, you know, a mixed bag sometimes, especially when you have all these different ranges of emotion, when you have anger and you have fear and resentment, and you have, you know, trying to act tough to try to survive in this really terrible environment with just garbage on the street and having to be evicted once in a while, and then having to resort to crime to get money to provide for his family, him and his mom, and also having the hope and the dream of meeting Samaritan and being in love with a superhero and finding the reason to believe that someone can come around and save the situation. He does a really great job with all of those, and his banter and his relationship with Sylvester Stallone is really great. Again, we've seen countless movies with an older person and a young kid, and those relationships can be, again, like a mixed bag. You can have something really great, like Indiana Jones and Short Round, or you can have an Anakin Skywalker and Phantom Menace on your hands. Again, it's a very tough situation to be in, and even in film school, they actually said stay away from the ABCs of filmmaking. Animals, boats, and children. If you can, don't put those in your movie because it's going to be way harder. But Samaritan pulled it off, and his relationship with the older actors, really well done. So Javon Walton, great job. And I know he's supposed to be 13 years old, right? So he's not like a kid, he's not like a 6-year-old, but he is a younger actor and he does hold his own. And I like the premise of this movie. Now, it is a superhero film, right? And I've said many times on this channel that I'm getting superhero fatigue. I'm talking about like the MCU movies or the DCEU movies. Whereas this movie has superheroes in it, but it doesn't necessarily feel like a superhero film. You see that long ago, 20 years ago, that there were 2 superheroes, Samaritan and Nemesis. They were 2 brothers, they had this giant battle, and then of course they both died. But 20 years later, the city is in ruin, people are upset, evictions are rising, people are just angry. And there's graffiti all over the city of the different superheroes' logos. Some people are Team Nemesis, some people are Team Samaritan, and you can understand why people identified with each superhero. One was more of a cop, you know, protecting the rich, and one was fighting for the everyman and having to punch up and having to hurt people if necessary. So again, there's a bit of a good versus evil, who is really good and who is really evil sort of a dynamic here. And there's a lot of unrest in the people. So our new bad guy wants to create the new Nemesis and create this giant uprising. It is very similar to Joker, right? A lot of good ideas are in here, but I don't think that they were necessarily fleshed out or really executed that well. And that's like the main problem with this movie. There's a lot of great elements in here, but they just don't really it's not a very smooth ride. And of course, Sylvester Stallone is in hiding and he's kind of watching this whole thing unfold. He reminded me of Obi-Wan Kenobi in this movie because he's basically just, you know, given up. It's like, well, why do I even have to do anything? You know, I have these powers and it's just, there's no use, right? But then of course, someone else comes along and revitalizes him, right? A new hope, if you will. So I like all those elements, but I don't think that they were necessarily done to perfection, right? I do give the film many props for trying. It's not a simple villain of the week movie. They definitely tried tries to have some themes, and it definitely does try to differ from the average superhero film that we're getting in theaters nowadays. So yes, the premise isn't really fully realized because the villain in this movie, he did have some intimidating moments, especially with some of the torture scenes or some of the interrogation scenes, like, oh, who did you talk to, kind of a thing, right? You know, so he does have a good performance, but I don't necessarily really understand or really fully buy why he wants this unrest. Like, we see a lot of people out on the streets, we see a lot of eviction notices, but again, kind of like Joker or like the Batman, we don't really fully understand why all this civil unrest is happening. It's just a couple of scenes on a TV, like, there's a lot of civil unrest, there's a lot of unemployment, right? So it's very simple and bare bones, but I feel like if they really focused on that, then I feel like there would have been a real sense of urgency and a real sense of knowing and understanding why this villain wants to do the things that he wants to do. I'll also mention that there is a twist at the end. I won't spoil it, but someone I also know who watched this movie was actually able to guess it within the first 10 minutes. I didn't. I had some second guesses here and there, but you know what? Some people, I will say, can guess the twist from early on. But when the twist finally happens, you might go, oh, okay, cool. Wait, how does that really change the story? Again, it kind of deals with the whole good and bad. We all have it in our heart, right? So like there is a bigger theme here, but it doesn't really add anything major to the story. The twist is really in there just because, oh, it'd be cool to have a twist, right? This movie's a lot smarter than everybody else. It doesn't really have the weight of a real Seven or an Empire Strikes Back kind of a reveal or a twist. The tone also, I felt, was a bit lost because some moments felt very heroic and felt very humorous, very light, and then other moments felt very dark and serious. And I think just choose one or the other. I also have to mention this. There is a bit of a backstory here with the big battle between the two superheroes 20 years ago. I'm totally fine with backstory, and I'm totally fine with like this epic battle in the past. Like other movies have done it before, totally fine. But when that seems like the more interesting storyline than what's happening right now, then that's a problem. Again, that's more of a subjective thing, but you know, I understand this kid wanting to rekindle the superhero hope, but I'm thinking to myself, you know what? I feel like it would have been a lot more epic to actually see that showdown happen in real time. And that kind of gets into the pacing, right? The beginning of this movie, I was really on board with it. I'm like, okay, I can completely understand the premise. I understand our main character. He wants to find this Samaritan superhero, and he thinks that he sees him, right, in Sylvester Stallone. I'm totally for that, but the movie couldn't really hold my attention for very long because it didn't really feel like it was leading anywhere. It just kind of felt like the same scenes were recycling over and over and over again, but then when you see a flashback to the earlier scenes or the earlier showdown between these two characters, I'm thinking, I want to see that. You know, it's not just because I want to see some action or just some over-the-top violence. I feel like there's a lot more drama happening back then than I do right now. So the pacing is a bit of an issue, and we do have some action sequences. Now, the action sequences are not terrible. They're actually pretty serviceable, and there were some moments where I'm like, oh, a lot of like gotcha moments. But I will admit that whenever a character is basically just invincible, and they don't really have any struggle with the villain or any of the henchmen, and it just shows there's waves and waves and waves of enemies coming, and he's just kind of mowing through them like it's no problem, well, I find that to be pretty boring because I feel like, why don't I just play a video game for this to happen? Just put it on easy mode and I can just, you know, mow down all these people, just beat everybody up. You know, that's a lot more fun than just watching it. And kind of like John Wick, and this is an unpopular opinion, but whenever John Wick just mows through a bunch of people and there's basically no struggle, I find it boring because there's no scratch, there's no sense of danger or urgency, or there's no threat involved. I'm thinking I'm just kind of watching people do these stunt choreography scenes on screen with no real tension. There's no real danger involved. So the action sequences, you know, they're serviceable because there are some like, oh man, he got hurt in that scene. Like, of course, you know, when someone gets punched and then he throws someone over the roof and it hits this other thing and like, that's awesome. But it gets old pretty fast. So I did just list off a bunch of problems, but I do think that the core of this movie has its heart in the right place, and there are some really good elements at the core, but surrounding it with the pacing and with just the structure of the script, I feel like if you just maybe had a couple more drafts, I think there's a really good movie here. It just isn't really fully realized yet. So not a bad movie by any means, but not a really great movie either. So for an overall rating, I'm gonna give it a 2 out of 5, but it's a high 2, going, it's okay. You know, it's not terrible. It's not going to insult your intelligence. There's nothing really in it that made me cringe. Okay, there's one moment. I won't spoil it. It's one of those like gotcha moments, one of those James Bond one-liners. Oh, it was bad. But apart from that, Samaritan's not a bad movie to watch on Amazon Prime. If it's really rainy outside and you have nothing else to do, Samaritan's not a bad choice, but I would say that, you know what, you have 100 years of cinema at your disposal. watch a really great movie that you've never seen before, as opposed to, you know, Samaritan on Amazon Prime. But watch the trailer. If you still think that you would like this movie, then I think you actually would. I do think that there would be a good fan base for this movie, and maybe even a sequel if it has enough of a following. So those are my thoughts on Samaritan. Let me know yours down in the comment section down below. Thank you guys so much for watching. Hit like and subscribe if you like this video and want to see more videos just like it. I'll see you guys again soon. Take care.